"You smell like Jasmine," the mafia boss said. "My dead wife's favorite scent. Who are you really?" The pink slip felt like a death sentence. "We're downsizing, Liana." "Mr." Henderson had said, avoiding my eyes. "Sales are down 17%. It's not personal." It felt personal. It felt like the pavement rushing up to meet me, fired from a diner job that barely paid minimum wage. It was the third job I'd lost in 6 months. I wasn't clumsy. I wasn't rude. I was just forgettable. And late. Twice last week. Because the bus routes had changed and I couldn't afford the cab fare. Now, I had exactly $48 and change in a worn envelope tucked under the mattress of my motel room. The rent was due in 3 days. $180. A sum that might as well have been $1 million. I was running. I had been running for 6 years. Ever since I turned 18 and fled Vince Russo's suffocating, monstrous world. Running meant staying invisible, working cash jobs, and never, ever letting anyone get close. But invisibility didn't pay the rent. My hands were shaking as I scanned the classifieds on the coffee-stained newspaper I'd grabbed from a trash bin. My eyes skipped over data entry, required a background check I'd never pass, and nanny, required references I didn't have. Then I saw it, a small, discreet ad. Villa Bianca, waitstaff needed, immediate start, apply in person. Villa Bianca. I'd walked past it once, on a rare day when I'd allowed myself to wander downtown. It wasn't a restaurant. It was a fortress. Ivy-covered stone. No visible windows from the street, just a single, imposing oak door with a polished brass handle. It was the kind of place that didn't advertise, which made the newspaper ad bizarre. It screamed exclusive. It screamed money. It screamed danger. But desperation was a louder scream. I spent my last few dollars on a new bar of soap and a tube of cheap concealer to hide the gray under my eyes. I put on my only good outfit, black slacks that were slightly too short and a white button-down shirt, ironed using the steam from the motel room's shower. My last act before I left was a ritual of comfort. I opened a small, cracked ceramic jar. Inside was a thick, yellowish perfume balm. I dabbed a tiny amount on my wrists and behind my ears. Jasmine. It was the only luxury I owned, the only thing I had that reminded me of a time before, a time when I was just a child, unaware of the darkness brewing in my own home. It was my armor. When I pushed open the heavy door to Villa Bianca, I stepped into another world. The air was warm and smelled of roasted garlic, old wine, and something floral I couldn't place. It was dark. The only light coming from candles flickering on tables covered in heavy, white linens. There was no hostess stand, a severe-looking woman in a black suit, her blonde hair pulled into a knot so tight it looked painful, intercepted me before I'd taken 2 steps. "Can I help you?" Her voice was a razor. I'm here about the waitstaff position," from the ad. She looked me up and down. I saw her register the cheap fabric of my shirt, the slight dampness of my hair from the walk and the drizzle. Her lips thinned. "We require extensive fine dining experience." "I learn very fast," I said, my voice coming out softer than I intended. I hated that about myself. "I'm a hard worker. I'm strong. I can carry heavy trays. I won't let you down." She stared at me for a long moment. I could feel the seconds ticking by, the rent money dissolving. "We had a last-minute cancellation for the private party tonight," she said, her tone clipped. "The owner is dining in the reserve room. It is a 3-table service, but he is particular. You will shadow Maria. You will not speak. You will not make eye contact. You will refill water and bread, and you will clear plates only when she signals you. Do you understand?" "Yes, absolutely. Thank you." "Your name?" "Liana." "Change in the staff room. You'll be on probation. $90 for the night. Cash." $90. My heart did a painful lurch. It wasn't enough for the rent, but it was a start. It was food. It was one more day. "Do not," she added, leaning in, "make a mistake. The owner, he does not tolerate incompetence." The next 3 hours were a blur of polished silver, heavy plates, and the terrifying, silent efficiency of the other servers. The kitchen was a blast furnace of shouted Italian phrases and scalding steam. I did exactly as I was told. I was a ghost. I refilled water glasses so quietly, the diners never even looked up. I cleared plates, stacking them on my arm just as Maria showed me. So far, so good. The private dining area was upstairs, separated by a velvet rope. Miss Petrov, the severe woman, was guarding it. "The owner is finished with his main course," she whispered to Maria. "He and his guests require a new bottle of the Barolo. Liana, you will carry the tray. Maria will pour. Do not spill." My hands were damp. Maria uncorked the dark red bottle and placed it, along with 4 pristine crystal glasses, on a heavy silver tray. She handed it to me. It weighed a ton. I followed Maria up the stairs, my cheap shoes silent on the thick carpet. The room was quiet. 4 men sat at a large, round table. They weren't speaking. The air was thick with cigar smoke and tension. 3 of the men were broad, dressed in dark suits, their faces hard. The 4th man sat at the head of the table. He wasn't like the others, and he was elegant, wearing a suit that was perfectly tailored, a crisp white shirt with no tie, and a dark gold watch. His hair was black, with distinguished threads of silver at the temples. He wasn't looking at us. He was staring at an unlit cigar in his hand, his expression carved from stone. He looked sad and dangerous. A beautiful, sleeping predator. This had to be the owner. Maria gestured for me to approach the table. I moved slowly, focusing on balancing the tray. I set it down on the sideboard, my muscles screaming in relief. "I will pour, sir," Maria murmured. The man didn't look up. I stood back, hands clasped behind me, trying to melt into the wallpaper. My job was done. Just wait. One of the other men, a heavy man with a thick neck, scraped his chair back as he stood up. "Alessandro, I need to use the facilities." He didn't see me. As he turned, his shoulder knocked my arm. It happened in slow motion. My elbow hit the sideboard. The tray, which I had placed too close to the edge, wobbled. The uncorked bottle of dark red wine tipped, rolled, and spilled. A perfect, horrifying stream of crimson splashed across the white linen, pooling near the owner's side and splashing onto the cuff of his immaculate white shirt. The room went absolutely, terrifyingly silent. The man who bumped me froze. Maria let out a tiny, strangled gasp. "I'm sorry," I whispered, lunging forward with a linen napkin, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't—" I dabbed uselessly at the spreading stain on the cloth. "Stop." The voice was not loud. It was a low, gravelly command that vibrated through the air and stopped my heart. I froze, my hand hovering over the table. Slowly, Alessandro Varelli, the owner, lifted his head. He looked at the red stain on his cuff. He looked at my trembling hand. Then he looked at my face. His eyes were the darkest brown I had ever seen, almost black. They held no anger. They held nothing. A complete, terrifying emptiness. I felt like a bug he was deciding whether to crush. "I'm so sorry," I whispered again, tears of sheer panic stinging my eyes. "It was an accident." He said nothing. He just looked at me. He stood up. He was tall, taller than I realized. He commanded the room without effort. I flinched, expecting him to yell, to hit me, to demand I be thrown out. He walked past me, heading for the door, presumably to clean his cuff. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for Miss Petrov to appear and end my life. He stopped. He was right beside me, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body, but he wasn't looking at me. His head was tilted. He turned, slowly. His face was no longer empty. It was transformed. Shock, confusion, a deep, agonizing pain that flashed so quickly I thought I'd imagined it. He stepped closer. I pressed myself back against the wall. He inhaled. It was a sharp, sudden intake of breath, audible in the silent room. His eyes, those black eyes, were fixed on my throat. "What is that?" he said. His voice was a rasp. "Sir," I trembled. "The perfume." He stepped closer, still. I could smell his scent now. Clean. Expensive soap and faint tobacco. "What is it?" I don't... "Jasmine," he whispered. It wasn't a question, he said it like a curse. He looked at me, really looked at me, as if he was seeing a ghost. His expression was so raw, so full of a grief I didn't understand, that it scared me more than his anger would have. He looked at Miss Petrov, who had materialized in the doorway, her face pale. "My office," he said to her, but his eyes never left me. "Her now." He turned and walked out of the room without a backward glance. Miss Petrov grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in like talons. "What did you do?" she hissed. "Nothing, he bumped me. I spilled—" "Not the wine," she snapped, dragging me down the hall. "He never notices the wine. I was being fired, or worse." These men, the way they sat, the way they deferred to him, these were not just businessmen. I had made a terrible, terrible mistake coming here. His office was as imposing as the man himself. Dark mahogany, walls lined with books, a massive desk, and a wall of glass overlooking the city's glittering lights. He was standing at the window, his back to me. His stained cuff was unbuttoned, rolled back once. "Leave us," he said to Miss Petrov. The door clicked shut, plunging me into a silence that was louder than any noise. I stood by the door, wringing my hands. "Mr. Varelli, sir, I am so sorry about the wine. I can pay for the shirt. You can take it out of my pay. All of it." He turned. He hadn't bothered to clean the stain. It looked like blood. "The perfume," he said. His voice was calm, deceptively calm. "Where did you get it?" I don't know the name. It's just perfume. Do not lie to me." He didn't raise his voice, but the command slammed into me. "It is not just perfume. It is called Le Nouvelle Bianche. It was custom made by a perfumer in Sicily. They made one bottle, only one, and it was buried with my wife 5 years ago." My blood went cold. I stared at him. A custom perfume buried with his wife? I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered. This was my grandmother's. She passed away. It's all I have left of her." The lie came easily. It was half true. The perfume did belong to someone I'd lost, in a way. I'd found the small jar in a box of my mother's things after she died, long before Vince had shown his true colors. The scent was the only comfort I had. "Your grandmother," he repeated. He searched my face, his eyes like scalpels, trying to find the truth. I held his gaze, fueled by the terror that he might take this one thing from me, too. He saw the fear, and he misinterpreted it, or maybe he saw exactly what he expected, a terrified girl telling a shaky lie. She wore it for comfort," I whispered, the lie solidifying. "I wear it for the same reason." He stared at me for a long time. The silence stretched, tight and painful. He was calculating. I could see his mind working, processing the impossibility. This girl, this waif, wearing Angela's scent. Finally, he looked away. He returned to the window. "Get out," he said. "Sir? You're done for the night. Go home. Miss Petrov will pay you." Am I fired?" He paused. "We will see. Now go." I didn't need to be told twice. I fled the office, grabbed the $90 from a stunned Miss Petrov, and ran out of the restaurant into the cold, misty night. I took the long way back, 2 buses and a 12-block walk. I kept checking over my shoulder, my heart hammering. The look in his eyes, it wasn't just anger. It was something broken, something obsessive. The Sleepy Hollow Motor Inn was even more depressing after the opulence of Villa Bianca. The neon vacancy sign flickered, casting a sickly pink light on the wet pavement. My room, 104, was at the back, near the humming ice machine. I locked the deadbolt and wedged the room's only chair under the knob. Standard procedure. I sat on the edge of the lumpy bed, the $90 in my hand. It felt dirty. I shouldn't go back there. The man was dangerous. The way he looked at me. The way the air crackled around him. But I had to. It was $90. It was a job. I was so tired. The adrenaline from the night, the fear of being fired, the fear of him. It all crashed down. I fell back on the thin pillow, still in my uniform, and cried, not loud, sharp sobs, but the silent, hot tears of a survivor who is just so tired of surviving. Across the street, parked in the shadows, a black sedan sat engine off. A man named Marco lowered his binoculars and picked up his phone. "She's at the Sleepy Hollow, room 104, boss, just like you thought," he said. She looks scared, crying, seems clean, no visitors, just a girl with bad luck. There was a long pause on the other end. "Hold position," Alessandro's voice came back, flat and hard. "Do not let her out of your sight." I must have fallen asleep. The sound that woke me was not a sound at all. It was a presence, a shift in the air. My eyes snapped open. The room was dark, save for the pulsating pink light from the sign. Scrape. A tiny, dry sound, like paper on concrete. I sat up, my heart instantly in my throat. I stared at the bottom of my door. A small, white, folded piece of paper slid into view, pushed from the outside. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. This was it. This was the moment I had dreaded for 6 years. He'd found me. Vince had found me. Time stopped. I waited for the wood to splinter, for the knob to rattle. Nothing. Just the hum of the ice machine and the drip of rain from the gutter. My legs felt like water, but I forced myself off the bed. I crept toward the door, my eyes wide in the dark. I snatched the paper. My fingers were numb as I unfolded it. 2 words, written in thick black marker. "Found you." A strangled sound escaped my throat. I backed away, stumbling over the cheap rug until my back hit the cold, damp wall. I grabbed the heavy glass lamp from the bedside table, holding it like a club. I sank to the floor, my eyes fixed on the door, and waited for the monster to come in. In his office, high above the city, Alessandro Varelli watched the grainy, black and white security footage. He had his men place the camera in the motel hallway the moment he'd sent her home. He had told himself it was to find out how she got the perfume, a loose end. He watched the screen. He saw the figure in the dark hoodie, face completely obscured, move silently to her door. He saw the paper slide under. He watched the figure melt back into the shadows. He leaned forward, his jaw tight. This changed things. This was not a girl with a stolen perfume. This was prey, and someone was hunting her. He felt a sudden, unwelcome flash of protectiveness. It was the same feeling he'd had for Angela, the urge to build a wall around her, to lock her away from the world that could hurt her. It was an instinct he had buried with his wife. He picked up his phone. "Marco," he said, his voice cold. "2 more men, full perimeter. I want eyes on every exit of that motel. And I want the man in the hoodie. I want to know who he is and who he works for. Now. She doesn't leave that room alone." I don't know how long I sat on the floor, clutching the lamp, minutes or hours. The sun eventually came up, filtering a weak gray light through the filthy curtains. I hadn't slept. I was vibrating with terror. I had to run, pack my bag, get on a bus, any bus, and go. But where? He had found me here, and he could find me anywhere. Vince was relentless. I was trapped. I had no money. I had no options. My only option, grim as it was to go back to the one place I'd been offered $90. I had to pretend everything was normal. I could use the restaurant's back door, work my shift, get my pay, and then disappear. I looked like hell. I splashed cold water on my face, tied my hair back, and put on the same uniform. I opened the door, wincing at the daylight, expecting a man to be standing there. Nothing. Just the empty walkway, slick with rain. I made it to Villa Bianca in a daze. When I walked in, Miss Petrov was waiting for me. Her expression was not angry. It was confused. "Liana," she said, pulling me aside, "come with me." She was firing me. "Miss Petrov, I need this job. Please, I promise I will be so careful." "It's not that." She led me to a small office. "The owner, he's made a decision. He's aware of your living situation. He doesn't find it acceptable. I can find a new place. I just need a few shifts." "He has offered you a suite," she said, as if reading from a script. "In the apartment building the company owns, downtown. It is fully furnished. It is secure." I stared at her. A suite? A company apartment? Why? This was wrong. This was all wrong. Rich men didn't give broke waitresses free apartments, not unless they wanted something I wasn't willing to give. "I can't accept that," I said, shaking my head. "No, thank you. But no. It wasn't a request." Miss Petrov's voice hardened. "He insists. He said there was a security incident near your motel last night. He said he has a responsibility to his staff. He considers it a security precaution." My blood ran cold. He knew. He knew about the note. How could he possibly know? Unless he sent the man. "A car is waiting to take you." Miss Petrov said, "Your things from the motel have already been collected." "My things!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "You went into my room?" "The manager let our security team in. Mr. Varelli insisted. He said you were in danger." I was in danger. But was I in danger from the man who left the note, or the man who apparently had me under surveillance? I had no choice. They had my bag. They had my $48. They had me. Numb, I let a man in a black suit lead me to a black car. The apartment was on the 30th floor. It was beautiful. All glass and white furniture and stainless steel. It was sterile. It felt like a museum. My single, pathetic duffel bag sat by the door, looking obscene on the white marble floor. I stood in the center of the living room, watching the city pass by far below. I was a prisoner, a bird in a very expensive cage. I waited all day. No one came. No one called. Food was in the fridge. Clothes, new and simple, were in the closet, in my size. The terror of the note was replaced by a creeping, suffocating dread. As evening fell, there was a knock. Not a timid knock, a sharp, solid, authoritative sound. I opened it. It was him, Alessandro Varelli. He wasn't in his expensive suit. He was dressed in dark trousers and a simple black cashmere sweater. He looked softer, younger, but no less dangerous. He was holding a single heavy key on a plain metal ring. I instinctively stepped back, putting space between us. He didn't enter, just stood in the doorway, his dark eyes cataloging me. He saw my fear. I think he expected it. "Your key," he said. His voice was quiet. "Why am I here?" My voice was a whisper, but I was furious. "Why did you have me followed? Why did you take my things?" "You were in danger," he stated, as if discussing the weather. "How did you know?" He ignored the question. He held out the key. I didn't take it. "I don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. I don't do that. I'm a waitress." His eyes flashed, a brief spark of anger. "I am not Vince Russo. I don't buy women." I flinched, a violent, full-body recoil, as if he had struck me. His face changed. The anger vanished, replaced by that same intense calculation from last night. "So," he said softly, "that's the name. Vince Russo." I had said it. The name I hadn't spoken aloud in 6 years. It just fell out of me. I felt sick. I don't know what you mean," I stammered, backing away. "Stop." He held up a hand. He stepped just inside the doorway. He looked at me, his gaze analytical, cold. "I don't like debts unpaid." "What debt?" I said, confused. "I told you I'd pay for the wine." "Not the wine." He looked at my wrist, where the perfume would be. "You disrupted things. Last night, You reminded me of something I prefer to keep buried. It caused an inconvenience. This apartment balances the account." "Balances the account?" "And," he continued, his voice dropping, "it keeps my assets secure." "Am I your asset, Mr. Varelli?" His lips twitched. It was the furthest thing from a smile. "You work for me. You are being hunted. That makes you my problem. This," he said, nodding at the apartment, "is security." He dropped the heavy key into my hand. His fingers brushed my palm. It wasn't gentle. It was a brand, an electric shock that ran straight up my arm. "You will work," he said. "You will live here. You will be safe. And you will not wear that perfume in my restaurant again." He turned and walked away. His footsteps were silent on the thick carpet. I stood in the doorway for a long time, the cold, heavy key in my hand. The apartment behind me was a fortress. The hallway he disappeared down was dark. I was safe. The note under the door couldn't reach me here. Vince couldn't reach me here. But as I looked at the key, I realized I had just traded one monster for another, and I had no idea which one was worse. The apartment was a cage made of glass. I had been there for 3 days, 3 days of waking up to a skyline that felt like a painting I was not allowed to touch. The sheets on the king-sized bed were so soft. They felt like water. The refrigerator was stocked with food I didn't know how to pronounce. A silent man named Franco, who looked like he could snap a man in two, drove me to and from Villa Bianca in a black sedan. At work, I was a ghost again, but for a different reason. The other staff, Maria, Miss Petrov, they all looked at me with a new, cold distance. I was no longer the clumsy new girl. I was the owner's something, his project, his asset. It made me feel smaller than I had at the motel. I was watering the plants. They were like everything else, sterile and perfect. Orchids and tall, waxy-leafed things that didn't look real. It was a task I'd given myself, something to do with my hands that didn't involve polishing silver. And then I saw it. Tucked in the corner of the living room, catching the morning sun, was a small terracotta pot. It was a jasmine plant. My heart stopped. It was small, but the white star-shaped blossoms were already unfurling, their scent heavy in the air-conditioned room. I backed away, my hand flying to my mouth. It was a message. It had to be. He had forbidden me from wearing the perfume, from carrying that scent into his world, but he had placed the source of it in my cage. It was a cruel, possessive gesture. It was a reminder that he knew my comforts and could control them. He could take the scent away, and he could give it back. I felt sick. This wasn't protection, this was ownership. That night, at the end of my shift, Miss Petrov stopped me as I was heading to the staff room. "Liana," she said, her voice clipped, "Mr. Varelli requests your presence at his estate this evening, 8 o'clock. My stomach tightened. "His estate? Is this part of the job?" "He wishes to discuss your permanent employment," she said, her eyes flat, betraying nothing. "Franco will take you. There is an appropriate dress in your closet." Of course there was. The drive was long, leaving the city lights behind for a darkness that was total. We drove for at least 30 minutes, finally turning onto a private road that wound up a hill. We passed through a set of iron gates that looked tall enough to keep out an army. The house, it wasn't a house, it was a compound, a sprawling, modern fortress of stone and dark wood, built into the cliffside, overlooking the black, restless ocean. Franco opened my door. Alessandro Varelli was waiting, standing on the steps. He wasn't in a suit. He wore dark trousers and a deep blue, button-down shirt. The sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He looked younger, more relaxed, and infinitely more dangerous. This was his territory. "Liana," he said. It wasn't a question. "Welcome to my home." He led me inside. The interior was not like the restaurant or the apartment. It was warm, rich, dark woods, leather-bound books, a massive stone fireplace that was crackling with a real fire. It smelled of old paper and the sea. "We'll eat in the dining room," he said. The dining room was vast, with a table that could have seated 30. It was set for 2. I sat, my back rigid, my hands in my lap. A quiet woman served us food, a steak so tender it melted, roasted vegetables and red wine. I barely tasted it. The dinner was an interrogation disguised as conversation. "How are you finding the apartment?" he asked, swirling the wine in his glass. "It's very generous, sir. Thank you." "Alessandro," he corrected me. "A man was arrested 2 blocks from your old motel. The night you received your note, he had a knife. He worked for a small-time loan shark, a man named Vince Russo." I dropped my fork. It clattered loudly against the china. I stared at him, my blood turning to ice. He knew. He hadn't just seen the note. He knew everything. I owed him money," I whispered. It was a lie, but it was the only one that made sense. A long time ago, I didn't think he was still... "He seems very persistent," Alessandro said, his eyes never leaving my face. "For an old debt, what did you take from him? Liana?" "Nothing, just myself." The words were out before I could stop them. His eyes narrowed. He filed the information away. "You mentioned your grandmother, the one who owned the perfume. Where was she from?" I scrambled, trying to build a plausible story. "Here, the city. She didn't travel much." "And your parents?" "They passed away, a long time ago." This, at least, was true. My mother, from a fever when I was 12. My father, I never knew. "You have no one." It was a statement, not a question. "No," I whispered. "No one." He nodded, as if I had just confirmed a final, important detail. "You've been moving from city to city for 6 years. Low-paying jobs, cash only. Always staying in places that don't require identification. You're not running from a debt. You're running from him." I couldn't breathe. He had unraveled my entire life in a few days, the life I had so carefully, so painfully, stitched together with lies and invisibility. "I don't know what you mean," I said, pushing my plate away. He didn't press. He just watched me. "You are a very bad liar, Liana, but you are a very good survivor." After dinner, he stood. "I have some calls to make. Coffee will be served in the library. Feel free to look around. Just don't touch the papers on my desk." The library was my undoing. It was 2 stories high, walled with books, a spiral staircase leading to a second level. The air smelled of leather and his faint, clean scent of tobacco and soap. It was the heart of the man. I felt like an intruder, but I was restless. I needed to understand him. Why me? Why this strange, suffocating protection? My hand trailed along a low bookshelf. My fingers brushed a silver frame. I picked it up. It was a photograph of a woman. She was on a boat, the wind pulling at her dark, laughing hair. She was stunning. Her eyes were full of a life and a light that I had never possessed. But it wasn't her face that made my blood freeze. It was the necklace. It was a silver locket, a delicate filigree design, almost like a spider web, with a single small pearl set in the center. My hand flew to my pocket. It was a reflex. I carried it everywhere. My only real possession, a small, worn, gray suede pouch, the drawstring frayed. I had not looked inside it in over a year, but I didn't need to. I knew what it held. The world tilted. My mind fell backward, 6 years into the past. I wasn't in a mansion. I was in the pale, sterile hallway of St. Jude's Hospital. I was 18 years old, hollowed out from grief and fear, having fled Vince's house only 2 weeks before. I was working as a night shift janitor, pushing a gray mop bucket, the smell of bleach stinging my nose. There was a crash, shouting. The emergency room doors burst open. "Multiple vehicle pileup," a paramedic yelled. They rushed a gurney past. I pressed myself against the wall to get out of the way. A woman was on the gurney, the woman from the photograph. Her beautiful dark hair was matted with blood. Her eyes were wide, not with pain, but with a frantic, terrified urgency. The gurney hit a bump. She cried out. I don't know why I did it. I dropped the mop. I stepped forward. A nurse shoved me. "Get back!" But the woman's hand, impossibly fast, shot out and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was like steel. "Please," she gasped. Her eyes locked on mine. She saw me, in my ugly gray scrubs, invisible to everyone else. She saw me. She was fumbling at her throat, where a chain had been. With her other hand, she ripped a small, suede pouch from inside her shirt, where it must have been hidden. She shoved it into my hand. It was warm from her skin. "Keep this safe," she whispered, her voice a thread of sound. "Please, don't let him." Then a doctor was there, and they were pushing the gurney again, wheeling her towards surgery. Her eyes never left mine until she was gone. I stood there, the hallway suddenly silent, the warm, soft pouch clutched in my hand. I heard a nurse say it later, by the coffee machine. "The woman from the pile-up, the one in triage, Angela Varelli. She didn't make it. Such a tragedy. The poor family." I never connected the name. I just kept the pouch. It was the last wish of a dying woman. It felt sacred. I never opened it. I never told a soul. I just kept it. My one secret, terrifying connection to a life I'd only glimpsed. "She was beautiful, wasn't she?" I screamed. I dropped the photograph. It hit the thick carpet with a soft thud. I spun around, my hand still clutching the pouch in my pocket. Alessandro Varelli was standing right behind me. He moved like a shadow. I'm sorry," I stammered, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. You said I could look. I'll pick it up." I bent down, but he was faster. He retrieved the photo, his expression unreadable as he stared at his wife's laughing face. "Her name was Angela," he said. His voice was flat, dead. The voice of a man who had hollowed out his own grief and was living in the shell. He placed the photo back on the shelf, turning it slightly away. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Liana," he said, turning his black eyes on me. "It's just a picture." She's very beautiful," I whispered. "I'm so sorry for your loss, sir. Alessandro." He watched me. His gaze was too intent. He had seen my reaction. He saw the sheer, unadulterated terror on my face. He knew it was more than just being startled. He knew I was lying, again. "Yes," he said, his voice soft. "She was." He looked at my pocket, where my hand was still clamped. "What are you holding, Liana?" "Nothing," I said too quickly, yanking my hand out. My key." He let the lie hang in the air between us. He knew I was lying, and I knew he knew. "Franco will take you home," he said. The warmth from before dinner was gone. He was the boss again. The dismissal was absolute. The ride back was a blur of panic. The locket, his wife's locket, the woman who died in the hospital, the woman who told me to keep it safe. My God, what had I stumbled into? A week passed. It was a tense, horrible new normal. I worked. I lived in the glass tower. I avoided the Jasmine plant. I felt Alessandro's eyes on me even when he wasn't there. I was a fly in his web, and he was just waiting. Then came the storm. It hit the city like a fist, a violent crash of thunder and rain that turned the streets into black rivers. It was late, past midnight, and I was the last server to leave. Franco wasn't at the curb. I waited under the restaurant's awning, pulling my thin jacket tight. The wind was brutal. I was not going to wait inside. Miss Petrov had already locked the front door. A black sedan slid to the curb, not Franco's car. The back window lowered, revealing Alessandro Varelli. He was in the driver's seat. "Get in," and he ordered. "I can wait for Franco, sir. The subways are flooded and Franco's car is stuck in the garage. I'm not leaving you on a street corner. Get in." I obeyed. The car was warm and smelled of rich leather. The silence was thick, broken only by the frantic thwack-thwack of the windshield wipers. We drove through the empty, rain-lashed streets. "Why are you so afraid of me, Liana?" he asked suddenly. His voice was low, cutting through the sound of the storm. I'm not afraid. I'm grateful. For the apartment, the job. Gratitude and fear look very similar, he observed. He glanced at me, his face illuminated for a second by a flash of lightning. You've been different since you came to my home. I never finished. A pair of headlights, high and bright, blasted through the side window. A dark, heavy-duty truck. It was coming from a side street, moving way too fast. It wasn't slowing down. "Alessandro," I screamed. He cursed, a low, vicious sound. He wrenched the wheel. The heavy sedan fishtailed on the slick pavement. He slammed on the brakes. The truck didn't hit us. It swerved at the last possible second, its horn blaring a deafening, angry sound. It grazed our bumper, the screech of metal on metal, a horrible scream. Then it was gone, speeding off into the deluge. We were stalled, in the middle of an intersection. The engine was dead. The only sound was the hammering of the rain on the roof and my own ragged breathing. I was shaking. Not just shaking, I was vibrating. A deep, uncontrollable tremor that started in my bones. It was the note. It was Vince. It was the near miss. The realization that someone had just tried to kill us. "Are you all right?" His voice was rough, tight. "Yes," I chattered, my teeth knocking together. "I'm fine." A crack of thunder exploded directly overhead. So loud it shook the car. I yelped, a pathetic animal sound, and covered my face with my hands. "Hey." His voice was softer now. He was restarting the car. The engine rumbled to life. "It's over. We're fine." He pulled the car to the curb, out of the intersection, and killed the engine. He turned on the small, interior light. He looked at me. I was crying, silent, terrified tears that I couldn't stop. "You're not fine," he said. He reached across the center console and took my hand. His was large, warm, and calloused. It completely engulfed mine. It was a strange, grounding feeling. "It was just the truck. It came so fast," I whispered. "That wasn't an accident, Ma," he said, his voice grim. "He aimed for us." He looked at my shaking hands. "But that's not why you're shaking. You're terrified." "I'm not." "Stop lying," he said, not angrily, just tiredly. He was still holding my hand. He hadn't let go. He was rubbing his thumb over my knuckles, a small, absent-minded gesture of comfort. "Liana," he said. His voice was different, deeper. The space in the car felt tiny, charged. I could smell the rain on his coat. I looked up. He wasn't looking at my hand. He was looking at my mouth. This was wrong. This was my boss. This was a grieving widower. This was the most dangerous man I had ever met. But he was also the only person who had, in 6 years, made me feel anything remotely like safe. He leaned in. It was slow, a question. I didn't pull away. I should have fled. But I was frozen. His lips touched mine. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It was hesitant for a single second. And then it was firm. It was a kiss of confusion, of searching. He tasted of wine and something metallic, like the storm. And I kissed him back. I kissed him back with all the terror and loneliness and desperation of the last 6 years. My free hand came up, not to push him away, but to steady myself, my fingers landing on his jaw. I felt the rough stubble, the warmth of his skin. The kiss changed. It deepened. It wasn't a kiss anymore. It was a drowning. His other hand came up, his fingers tangling in my damp hair, cupping the back of my neck. He pulled me closer, his mouth slanting over mine, desperately. This was not comfort. This was raw. It was full of his grief and my fear. It was messy and broken, and it was the most real thing I had felt in my entire adult life. He broke it. He shoved me back, not violently, but with a sudden, absolute finality. He recoiled as if he'd been burned. He was breathing hard, his chest rising and falling. He stared at me, his dark eyes wide, filled with a sudden, sharp passion and a bottomless, self-hating guilt. He slammed the heel of his hand against the steering wheel. "Get out!" he rasped. What? I looked out the window. We were blocks from the apartment. We're not... I don't care. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring out the windshield into the rain, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth would break. "Don't," he said, his voice a low, strangled warning. "Don't make me feel things I buried for a reason." The words hit me like a slap. It wasn't a rejection. It was an accusation. He was angry at me, angry that I had, for a second, made him forget his wife. Shame, hot and burning, washed over me. I was the help. I was the girl he was hiding. I was nothing. And I had let him kiss me. I had kissed him back. I fumbled for the door handle, my hands shaking again. I stumbled out of the car, slamming the door. I was left standing on the curb in the pounding, freezing rain. The sedan sat there for a second, a black shadow, and then it sped away, disappearing into the storm. I walked. I don't know how long it took. I was soaked to the bone, the cold seeping into my marrow, but all I could feel was the burning shame. I got to the apartment, the glass prison. I unlocked the door. I was done. This wasn't safety. This was a different kind of trap, a more complicated one. He was right. I was making him feel things, and he, God help me, was making me feel. And feeling was a luxury I couldn't afford. Feeling was how Vince trapped you. Feeling was a weakness. I went to the closet, past the beautiful black dress, and grabbed my original duffel bag. I started packing. The 2 worn-out sweaters, the faded picture of my mother, the spare toothbrush, and the small gray suede pouch. I was leaving. Tonight, I would take my chances at the bus station. I would take my chances with Vince. It was better than this. Better than being the ghost he was trying to turn me into, or the woman who was betraying his wife's memory. As I zipped the bag, miles away, the door to room 104 of the Sleepy Hollow Motor Inn splintered off its hinges. The man in the hoodie, the one from the hallway, burst into the empty room. He cursed, seeing it vacant. He wasn't there for me. He was there for the locket. He tore the room apart. He slashed the thin mattress with a knife, pulling out handfuls of stuffing. He smashed the cheap lamp against the wall. He threw the particle board dresser to the ground. He was frantic. He grabbed the pillow from the bed, the one I had cried into for so many nights. He lifted it, smelling the fabric. His body went still. He pulled out his phone. "She's gone," he snarled. "But she was definitely here. And, boss, I smell it. That Jasmine, it was her." He listened, his breathing heavy. "Yeah, I don't know where they moved her, but I'll find her. I'll get the locket." He threw the pillow down and stalked out of the destroyed room, disappearing back into the rainy night. I was still soaking wet from the rain, shivering in the marble entryway of the apartment. The key Alessandro had dropped in my palm felt like a block of ice. I stared at the door. I had walked home. 5 blocks in the freezing deluge, but the cold was nothing. It was the shame that chilled me to the bone. He had kissed me, and I had let him. I had kissed him back. And he had thrown me out. "Don't make me feel things I buried for a reason." I was a disruption, a mistake. I was the help who had, for one insane, storm-drenched moment, become something else, something he regretted instantly. The guilt rolling off him had been as thick as the humidity, and it had been aimed at me. I was the one who had made him betray his wife's memory. I walked to the closet, my wet clothes dripping on the pristine white rug. I pulled down my old, battered duffel bag. This was over. This wasn't safety. This was a new, more complicated kind of danger. Vince Russo wanted my body to sell, to own Alessandro Varelli. He was being haunted, and he was trying to turn me into the ghost. I threw my few belongings into the bag, the 2 faded sweaters, the spare pair of jeans. I grabbed the small, worn photo of my mother. My fingers brushed the gray suede pouch, hidden in the bag's inner pocket, the last wish of a dying woman. A woman who, I now realized, was connected to all of this. Angela Varelli. The locket, the perfume, It was too much. I was caught in a story I had never meant to be a part of. I zipped the bag. I would go to the restaurant, work my shift as if nothing had happened, get my pay, and then I would go to the bus station and disappear. This time for good. I must have looked like a corpse when I walked into Villa Bianca. I kept my head down, my hands shaking as I polished the wine glasses. I could feel Maria's eyes on me, and Miss Petrov's. They knew. I didn't know how, but they knew the owner had driven me home, or at least driven me part way. The shift was agony. Every time the kitchen door opened, I expected to see him. Every quiet footfall made me jump. He waited until the last table had paid, until the kitchen was quiet and the staff was cashing out. Miss Petrov appeared at my side as I was hanging up my apron. Her face was pale. "He's in his office," she said, her voice a low whisper. "He's waiting for you, and he is not happy." My heart hammered against my ribs. He was going to fire me. He was going to throw me out. Good. It made leaving easier. I walked to his office, my duffel bag clutched in my hand. He wasn't standing at the window. He was sitting at his massive desk, the room lit only by a single green banker's lamp. The shadows on his face made him look demonic. He didn't look up when I entered. "You lied to me," he said. His voice was not the raw, emotional rasp from the car. It was cold, colder than the bottom of the ocean. You lied, he repeated, louder this time. He stood, and his hands swept across the desk, a stack of glossy photographs scattered across the polished wood. I stepped closer, my stomach twisted. They were pictures of my motel room, room 104, but it was destroyed. The mattress was slashed open, stuffing pouring out. The lamp was in pieces against the wall. The particle board dresser was overturned. It was a scene of pure, frantic violence. "My men found this last night," he said, his voice a lethal monotone. "While I was dealing with the truck that tried to run us off the road, while you were sitting in my car, lying to my face about a simple debt." He leaned across the desk, his eyes burning into me. They were looking for something. Liana. Something they were willing to kill for. Something they tore that room apart to find. Something you have. So I ask you again, what did you really take from Vince Russo? The lies were gone. The floor fell away. I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and the truth was the only thing left. I started to shake. The duffel bag dropped from my hand. "He's not a loan shark," I whispered, the words ripping out of my throat. He's my stepfather." Alessandro didn't move, but his eyes narrowed. He was listening. "My mother, she married him when I was 13. He was charming, he sold antiques. At least, that's what I thought. But he sold other things." The word felt filthy on my tongue. Cars, drugs, women. I was crying now, the hot, silent tears I hated. He tried to sell me. I was 17. I heard him on the phone with a client talking about me, my price. Alessandro's face was carved from granite. He looked inhuman. "I ran," I choked out. "I took what cash my mother had hidden in her jewelry box, and I ran. I've been running for 6 years. I never stayed in one place long enough for him to find me. Until now. Until that note." "And the locket," Alessandro said. It wasn't a question. "The thing in your pocket, the one you were clutching in my library." He knew. He saw everything. "He's not just looking for me," I whispered. "He's looking for this." My hand, trembling so badly I could barely control it, went into my pocket. I pulled out the small, gray suede pouch. Alessandro froze. He didn't look at the pouch. He looked at my hand. The blood drained from his face. He looked stricken, as if I had just pointed a gun at him. "Where?" he said, and his voice was not a voice at all. It was a dying breath. "Where did you get that?" I found it a long time ago." "Liar," he snarled. "I didn't. A woman gave it to me. I was working as a janitor at St. Jude's Hospital 6 years ago. There was an accident, a car crash. They brought her in. She was dying. She grabbed me. She pushed this into my hand and she made me promise. She said, "Keep this safe. Please, don't let him." I stopped. The pieces were slamming together in my head, a horrible, sickening puzzle. The woman in the photo, the name I'd heard the nurses say. Her name, Alessandro breathed, finishing my thought, was Angela, my wife. I staggered back, my hand flying to my mouth. "Your wife? The woman from the photo? She gave this to me." "She never went anywhere without it," he said. He was talking to himself, his eyes distant, lost in a memory of unimaginable pain. It was her mother's. She kept it on a chain. When they found her, the chain was broken, the pouch was gone. I thought in the crash. He stepped around the desk. He didn't rush. He moved like a man walking underwater. He held out his hand. "Give it to me." I placed the small, warm pouch in his palm. His hands, the hands that had been so strong, so rough in the car, were shaking. His fingers fumbled with the drawstring. He pulled out the locket, the silver filigree, the single pearl. He stared at it for a long, silent moment. Then, with a click, he opened it. I had never opened it. I had been too afraid. It wasn't a picture. Nestled in the worn blue velvet was a tiny, dark object, a microdrive. Alessandro's breath hitched. He stared at it, and in a second, his grief, the vast, empty sadness that clung to him, it vanished. It was burned away by a sudden, white-hot, apocalyptic rage. "My God," he whispered, "she wasn't just in a car accident. He killed her." He looked at me, his eyes blazing with a terrifying new light. She was investigating him, wasn't she? Angela. She was looking into Russo's trafficking. She was smart, too smart. She must have found something, his records. And she put them on this drive. He slammed his fist on the desk. The lamp jumped. The pictures scattered. "He killed her!" he roared, the sound echoing in the opulent room. "He ran her off the road to get this, and she gave it to you." I couldn't speak. I was the link. I was the last living witness to his wife's final act. He was on his phone before I could even take a breath. His voice was pure ice. "Marco, full detail. I want a 24/7 security team on Liana. She does not breathe without one of you seeing it. 2 men at her apartment door, 1 in the car. No one gets within 20 feet. No one. Do you understand?" He paused. "Get Luca. I want the old Russo files. All of them. The ones from 5 years ago. The trafficking investigation. The one I closed. Reopen everything. I want his entire operation burned to the ground by morning. I want him." He hung up. He was pacing. He was a caged panther. He was no longer a grieving widower. He was a mafia boss. He was a man with a purpose. Vengeance. He looked at me. I wasn't Liana anymore. I was a tool. I was the key. "You're not safe at the apartment," he said. "Not now that he knows you're in the city. He'll find you. You're coming with me, to the estate." "No," I whispered. He stopped pacing. "What did you say?" "No." I was terrified, but a cold, hard defiance was setting in. "I'm not going with you. I'm not a pawn. I'm not the evidence." "You don't have a choice, Liana. This isn't a request." "You're just using me," I said, my voice gaining strength. "This isn't about protecting me. This is about this." I pointed to the locket on his desk. "This is about your revenge. You are the only thing that connects him to my wife's murder," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You are the only thing that matters. You will be protected, whether you like it or not." He was just like Vince, and he was just another man with a code, another man who wanted to own me, to use me for his own purposes. I had to run. I waited until the next day. The 2 guards outside my apartment door were stoic and silent. They followed me to my shift. They followed me back. I was a prisoner in my glass tower. I waited for the shift change. At 4 in the afternoon, I watched from the peephole. The 2 day guards left, and the 2 night guards arrived. There was a gap. 30 seconds. I grabbed my duffel bag. I didn't take the elevator. I ran to the emergency exit and flew down 30 flights of stairs. My legs were burning, but I didn't stop. I burst out onto a side street, gasping for air, and flagged the first cab I saw. "Port Authority bus terminal," I choked out. "Please, hurry." I ran into the terminal. It was a sea of people, a perfect place to get lost. I got in line for a ticket, anywhere. I didn't care. Just out. "One ticket to Philadelphia," I said to the woman behind the glass. "That'll be $42. I fumbled in my pocket for the cash. A hand closed on my arm. It wasn't a rough grip, but it was absolute steel. I froze. Going somewhere? I turned. It was Alessandro. He didn't look angry. He looked wrecked. His hair was undone. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked like he hadn't slept. He looked hurt. "Let go of me," I hissed, trying to pull my arm free. People were starting to stare. "I don't think so." He was quiet, but his voice was iron. He pulled me out of the line, into a small alcove by a bank of dead telephones. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded. "I'm leaving. You can't keep me. You can't lock me up." "Lock you up," he yelled, and now he was angry. He slammed his hand against the wall next to my head. "Is that what you think this is? I am trying to keep you alive. Do you have any idea what he will do to you when he finds you? When he finds out what you have?" "I don't care," I shouted back, tears of fury and terror streaming down my face. "It's better than this. It's better than being your weapon. You don't care about me. You just care about your revenge." "That's not true." "Yes, it is. I'm just a ghost to you. I remind you of her, and you hate it. I'm just a replacement, something to. He grabbed my face, his hands hard on my jaw, forcing me to look at him. His eyes were blazing. "You remind me of everything I lost," he yelled, his voice raw, echoing in the terminal. "Every damn day. I look at you and I see her. I smell that Jasmine and I want to tear the world apart, but you are not her." His voice broke. The fury vanished, leaving something raw and agonizingly vulnerable. "And I'm not losing you." The words hung in the air. He wasn't talking about the micro drive. He wasn't talking about his wife. He was talking about me. I stopped fighting. The anger, the fear, it all drained out of me, leaving me weak-kneed and hollow. I sagged against the wall. He saw the change. His grip on my face softened. His thumbs brushed the tears from my cheeks. "Come home, Liana," he whispered. It was a plea. "Please, let me end this. Let me keep you safe. Really safe." I stared into his dark, haunted eyes. I was trapped, but for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to be free. I nodded, a tiny, broken movement. He didn't take me to the apartment. He took me to the estate, the fortress on the cliff. The house was silent, filled with shadows and the sound of the distant ocean. His men were ghosts at the perimeter. He poured 2 glasses of brandy, his hands unsteady. He handed one to me. We stood in the library, in front of the cold fireplace. The silence was thick. The fight at the terminal had drained us both. "You're safe here," he said, finally. "His men can't get past the gates." I looked at him, my voice small. "And who protects me from you? Alessandro." He visibly flinched. He had no answer. He set his glass down. He walked over to me, stopping just inches away. I could feel the heat coming off him. He didn't try to touch me. He just looked at me, his gaze searching. He slowly knelt in front of me. The gesture was so unexpected, an act of such complete surrender. It took my breath away. He was the king, and he was on his knees. "I would never hurt you, Liana," he said, his voice thick. "You have to believe that." I looked down at the dark, silver-streaked hair. I saw the grief, the rage, the loneliness, and I believed him. My hand, trembling, came up. I touched his face, a hesitant, light touch. "I'm so scared," I whispered. "I know," he rasped, closing his eyes, leaning into my touch. "So am I." He leaned in. He kissed me. It was not the desperate, angry kiss from the car. It was slow, tentative. It was a question, a plea for permission. I kissed him back. My other hand came up, my fingers tangling in his hair. I wasn't drowning. I was answering. I was saying yes. He rose, his mouth never leaving mine, and lifted me. I was weightless. He carried me from the library, up the dark, spiral staircase. He didn't take me to a guest room. He took me to his... He set me down on the edge of the massive bed. The room was dark, the only light from the moon over the ocean. It smelled of him, and faintly, of her, of Jasmine. He stepped back. He was at war with himself. I could see it. His hands were clenched at his sides. "We shouldn't," he whispered. His voice was strangled. This is her room. It's wrong." He was holding back. He was afraid. Not of me, of himself, of his wife's ghost. I wouldn't let him. I was not a ghost. I was real. I stood up. I walked to him. I put my fingers on his lips, silencing him. "It's okay," I whispered. I was trembling. I had never done this. Not really. Not like this. Not with a choice. But I was the one who acted. My shaking fingers went to the buttons of his shirt. He stood perfectly still, as if he was afraid to move. I pushed the shirt open. His skin was warm. My fingers, ice cold, traced a line over his collarbone, down his chest. I felt it, a puckered, raised line on his ribs, an old scar. He flinched, a sharp intake of breath. I didn't pull away. I leaned in, and I pressed my lips to it. A sound tore out of his chest, half groan, half sob. His control broke. His hands were on me, but not in a rush. He touched me like I was made of spun glass, like I was the only truth he knew. His hands were on my waist, his thumbs rubbing small, soothing circles. He buried his face in my neck, kissing my throat, my shoulders, his breath hot on my skin. "Liana," he whispered, my name a prayer against my skin. "Liana." This was not the frenzied, guilty passion from the car. This was a slow, agonizing discovery. He was memorizing me. He was touching me like a blind man learning a face. But he was still holding back. I could feel the guilt, the hesitation, like a wall of ice between us. I pulled back. I put my hands on his face, forcing him to look at me. "Look at me, Alessandro," I said, my voice surprisingly strong. His dark, pained eyes met mine. "You're not with her," I said. "You're with me." His eyes snapped. The wall shattered. He kissed me, and this time, it was a claim. It was raw, and it was desperate, and it was real. He lowered me to the bed, his hands in my hair, his mouth worshipping mine. It was a collision. Two damaged, lonely souls, clinging to each other in the dark, trying to find a moment of solace. He held me like I was an anchor in his storm, and I held him like he was the only solid ground I had ever known. I woke first. The gray morning light was filtering in. I was wrapped in his arms, my head on his chest. His breathing was deep and even. He was asleep. In the daylight, with the lines of grief and rage smoothed away, he looked peaceful, almost young. I slipped out of his arms, wincing as my bare feet hit the cold floor. I found his shirt, the one I had unbuttoned, and pulled it on. It was huge, hanging to my knees. It smelled of him. I walked out onto the private balcony. The ocean was calm, a sheet of gray steel. I felt different, not safe. I would never feel safe, but I felt anchored. Then I heard his voice. He was awake. He was downstairs, in the library. The door was open. His voice was not the soft, broken rasp from last night. It was the hard, cold voice of the boss. I stood at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows, and listened. "I don't care what it takes," he was saying, his voice a low, lethal snarl. "I want him found. I want his head on a platter. No, not a meeting, a resolution. Take him out. I want him gone by the time the sun sets. Understand? A hit. He was ordering a hit." My blood ran cold. I didn't know who the target was. Vince? The man who drove the truck? It didn't matter. The man who had held me all night, the man who had kissed my scars, the man who had whispered my name as if it were holy, was a killer. I backed away, retreating into the bedroom. He had promised to protect me, but this was his world. This was his code. I looked at my hands. I had just given myself to a monster. I had run from Vince, only to fall into the bed of Alessandro Varelli. Was he my protector? Or was he just the more powerful of the two men who wanted to own me? The doubt was a suffocating, cold fog, and I was lost in it. The balcony was cold. The stone chilled my bare feet, but I didn't care. I pulled his black cashmere shirt tighter around me, the sleeves hanging past my hands. It smelled of him, of that clean tobacco scent, of brandy, and of the night we had just spent together. I stared at the gray, pre-dawn ocean. My body felt anchored for the first time in 6 years. I had not felt like a ghost. I had felt real. But the voice I'd heard from the library, the voice of the boss, had shattered the peace. Take him out. I want him gone by the time the sun sets. A hit. He had ordered a man's death as easily as he had ordered dinner. The man who had held me, who had kissed my scars, who had made me feel seen. He was a killer. The brutal, cold reality of it settled over me, heavier and colder than the ocean mist. I was a fool. I had run from Vince Russo, a monster I knew, straight into the arms of a more powerful one, a monster who could make me feel things Vince never could. That was the most dangerous part. He had disarmed me with a vulnerability that I now saw was a mask, or worse. It was real, but it existed alongside this cold-blooded code. I didn't know which was worse. I stayed on that balcony for over an hour, until the sun was a weak, white line on the horizon. I was a prisoner again, but this time, the cage was my own confusion. When I finally went back inside, he was gone. A note was on the pillow. Don't leave the estate. I'll be back tonight. We need to talk. We need to talk. Not, I'm sorry, or last night was just a command. I spent the day in a daze. The house was silent, staffed by people who moved like shadows. I was terrified, but beneath the terror was a new, cold anger. I was tired of being a pawn. I was tired of being protected by men who were just as dangerous as the ones hunting me. I needed to know. I needed to understand the woman who had handed me that locket, Angela. I was drawn, inevitably, to the library. It was his inner sanctum, the room where he'd ordered a man's death. I felt like a trespasser, but I didn't care. On his desk, I saw the locket. He had left it out, open. The tiny microdrive glinting in the morning light. Beside it was a single file. Russo V. My hands were shaking. This was the file he'd requested, the one he'd reopened. I opened it. It wasn't just data. It was his wife's life, or rather, her death. There were old, grainy police reports, a diagram of a car crash on a wet highway, a single, blurred photo of a black sedan crushed against a guardrail. The official report called it a single-vehicle accident, loss of control, case closed. But beneath that, it was Alessandro's own private investigation, notes scribbled in a hard, black ink, witness, none, skid marks, wrong angle, phone records wiped. He had never believed it. He had known, 5 years ago, that she was murdered. Then I found the photographs. They weren't of the crash. They were of her, Angela. In one, she was laughing on the boat, the picture I had seen before. In another, she was at a park, holding a small, laughing child. And then, I saw it. My breath left my body. It was a framed photo, tucked at the bottom of the file as if he couldn't bear to look at it. It was Angela. She was dressed in a simple, elegant blue dress, cutting a ribbon. Behind her was a wall, and on that wall was a large, painted mural of cartoon animals and a bronze plaque. St. Jude's Hospital, the Angela Varelli Children's Wing. St. Jude's, my hospital, the place I had mopped floors, the place she had died. It all crashed into place. She wasn't just a patient who had been rushed in. She was the hospital's benefactor. She was a patron. She would have been there all the time. She would have known the staff, the layout. She wouldn't have just been a dead nurse, as Russo's man had called her. She'd been investigating him, using her access to the hospital, a place where Vince's network was probably finding vulnerable girls, runaways, desperate mothers. She'd been digging, and she had been killed for it. I wondered how long it would take you to look. I didn't jump. I just closed my eyes. The cold dread from the morning returned. Alessandro was standing in the doorway. He was in a fresh suit, his hair perfectly combed. The vulnerable man from last night was gone. The boss was back. "You ordered a man's death this morning." I said. It wasn't a question. He didn't flinch. "I ordered a threat to be removed, the man who drove the truck, the one who tried to kill us. He was one of Russo's. You just had him killed." "I had him handled," he said, his voice hard. "This is my world, Liana. This is what I do. I protect what is mine, and whether you like it or not, you are mine to protect." "Like you protected her," I shot back, my voice shaking as I held up the photo of the St. Jude's dedication. "Is this how you protected her? By letting her dig into a monster like Russo? By letting her get killed?" The words hit him. He recoiled, his face paling, the mask of the boss cracking. "I didn't know," he whispered. His voice was raw. "I swear to God, I didn't know what she was doing. I thought it was just charity. She loved that hospital. She was always there. I never connected it." He walked to the desk, his eyes fixed on the photo. "The accident," he said, his voice thick with a 5-year-old grief. "It never sat right with me. The car was new. She was a good driver, but the police, they were too quick to close it. I looked, I pushed, but I had no proof, no leads. I had nothing, just a hole in my life, until you." He looked at me, his eyes dark with a pain I recognized, the pain of loss. "He murdered her, Alessandro," I said, my voice quiet. "He ran her off the road to get that locket, and she gave it to me." He nodded, his jaw tight. "And now, we have the proof. He thinks it's buried. He thinks the only person who knew is dead. He's gotten arrogant. He's sloppy." He looked at me, a new, cold calculation in his eyes. "He's attending the Meridian Foundation Gala tonight. It's a black tie fundraiser. The mayor will be there, the chief of police. He'll be surrounded by the very people he's been paying off for years. You're going to, what, have him shot at a party?" "No," Alessandro said. "We're going to give him a chance to hang himself. I need to know who he's talking to, who in that room is in his pocket. And I need to see the man who killed my wife." "You can't go," I said. "He knows your face. He'll run." "I'm not going," Alessandro said. He looked at me, his gaze so intense it was a physical weight. "We are, but he won't see you." The dress was emerald green, silk that felt like water, and it was backless. It was not my style. It was the style of a woman who belonged in that world. A woman I was not. "And this," said the stylist, a woman with sharp, bird-like features, as she fixed a heavy diamond necklace around my throat. "Mr. Varelli insisted on this." She turned me to face the mirror. I didn't recognize myself. My hair, usually tied back in a messy knot, had been professionally styled, falling in soft, dark waves. The makeup was subtle but transformative. I looked older, confident, dangerous. "And the final touch," the stylist said, holding up a delicate black lace mask. "It's a masquerade ball." Alessandro was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, a black mask held in his hand. He was in a tuxedo that had been tailored to perfection. He looked like a king in mourning. He stopped breathing when he saw me. He just stared. His eyes traced a line from my face, down my neck, to the floor, and back up. He wasn't looking at me like I was his employee. He wasn't looking at me like I was his wife's ghost. He was looking at me like I was beautiful. "It'll do," he said, his voice rough. He held out his arm. The ballroom was a sea of glittering masks and quiet, powerful conversations. The air was thick with perfume and the sound of a string quartet. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying. "Russo is here," Alessandro murmured in my ear, his hand a heavy, warm presence on the small of my back. By the bar, black tuxedo, red mask. "Don't look at him." I looked. I couldn't help it. It was him. 6 years. And he hadn't changed. The same slick, dark hair, the same charming smile that never, ever reached his cold, dead eyes. He was laughing, a glass of champagne in his hand, schmoozing with a man I recognized as a city councilman. My stepfather, the man who had tried to sell me, the man who had murdered Alessandro's wife. Bile rose in my throat. I wanted to run. "Easy." Alessandro's voice was a low vibration against my skin. "You are just a girl in a green dress. He doesn't know you. You are invisible." I need some air," I whispered, pulling away from him. "Liana, don't—" "I'm just going to the powder room. I'll be right back." I slipped away from him, melting into the crowd, but I wasn't going to the powder room. I was a moth, drawn to the most dangerous flame in the room. I circled the bar, keeping my back to him, using the crowd as cover. I stopped just a few feet away, pretending to study a painting, my ears straining. He was talking to the councilman. Sloppy," the councilman was saying, his voice low. "This business with the truck. It's attracting the wrong kind of attention. Vince, Varelli is not a man you poke." Russo laughed. It was the same sound that had haunted my nightmares, a wet, self-satisfied chuckle. "Varelli is a ghost," Russo said, taking a sip of champagne. "He's been mourning that wife of his for 5 years. He's not a problem. The truck was a loose end, a scare tactic." "And the motel?" the councilman pressed. "Tearing the place apart. That was not subtle." "A precaution," Russo dismissed. "I got a tip, a girl, from 6 years ago. Someone who might have had something, but she's gone. Vanished, just like the other one." "The other one?" Russo leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The nurse, the one who started this whole mess, the one from St. Jude's." My blood went cold. "She was so arrogant," Russo sneered, digging around, asking questions, thought she was untouchable. So I touched her, ran her right off the road. She should have kept her mouth shut, just like this new girl will when I find her. A dead nurse. He hadn't even known. He hadn't known he'd murdered Angela Varelli, the wife of a mafia boss. He had just eliminated a problem, a woman, a nurse who got in his way. A white-hot, blinding rage, purer than any fear I had ever known, flooded my veins. I turned. I took 1 step, 2. I was going to rip that red mask off his face. I was going to scream. I was going to... A hand, a steel vice, clamped down on my arm. It was Marco, Alessandro's man. His face was hidden by a simple black mask, but his eyes were urgent. "Not here, Miss Liana," he hissed, his voice like gravel. "The boss, now." He didn't pull me. He steered me, a powerful, unstoppable force, through the crowd, out a side door, and into the cold, blessedly quiet night. Alessandro was there, by the car, ripping his own mask from his face. He was furious. "What in God's name did you think you were doing?" he roared, grabbing my shoulders. "Do you want to get us both killed?" "He called her a nurse," I screamed back, the tears finally coming. He was bragging. He said she should have kept her mouth shut. He didn't even know who she was. Alessandro, he just killed her." The fury in his face vanished, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. "What did you say?" "He called her a dead nurse," I sobbed. He said he ran her off the road for asking questions. He doesn't even know it was your wife. He just murdered a woman." Alessandro stared at me. He looked at me as if he was seeing me for the first time, not as the girl who wore the perfume, not as the girl who brought him the locket. He was seeing a survivor. He was seeing the only other person in the world who understood the true, random, pointless evil of the man who had ruined both our lives. He let go of my shoulders. He looked up at the glittering party, his jaw working. "He's not just a killer," Alessandro said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "He's an idiot, and that makes him sloppy." He looked at me. You are the last living link. You are the only person who can tie him to that night. He doesn't know your face, but he knows your scent. He knows you exist. You're not just a survivor. Liana, you're the key to all of this." The ride back to the estate was silent. The adrenaline was gone, leaving me exhausted and hollow. That night, we didn't go to his room. We sat in the library, the locket on the table between us, the fire crackling in the hearth. He looked at me for a long time. "You're not my wife," he said, his voice quiet, rough. I've been looking for her in you. The Jasmine, the way I don't know, the way you stand. But tonight, when I saw you walk toward him, I wasn't thinking about her. I was thinking about you." He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "You're not Angela, but you might be the woman who saves her soul." The words settled in my heart. I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't a replacement. I was Liana. He stood, pulling me to my feet. He didn't kiss me. He just held me, his arms wrapped around me, his chin resting on the top of my head. I pressed my face into the wool of his sweater. I've never trusted a man before," I whispered, the confession muffled against his chest. "Not really. My stepfather, he taught me that trust was just a way to get hurt." His arms tightened. "I know, Wing," he said. "I know, I'm not him." "I know," I whispered, and for the first time, I think I actually did. We went upstairs. This time, it was different. It wasn't the desperate, frantic collision of our first night. It was slow. It was healing. He undressed me with a reverence that made me want to cry. He kissed the old, faint scar on my shoulder, a burn mark from when I was 10. He kissed my hands, my wrists. There was no guilt in his eyes tonight, just me. I touched his face, his chest, the rough scar on his ribs. We moved together with a quiet, desperate need, not for passion, but for connection, to erase the night, to erase Russo, to erase the last 6 years of running. He held me all night. I cried. I cried for the girl I had been, for the woman I had become, and for the life I had lost. And he just held me, his hand stroking my hair, his presence a solid, warm wall against the world. He didn't try to fix it, and he didn't offer platitudes. He just held me, and it was enough. I woke up to the sun on my face. He was already gone, but the bed was still warm. I felt peaceful, a strange, fragile peace. I got up, showered, and put on the simple clothes from my apartment, which had been brought to the estate. I felt a sudden, suffocating need for normalcy, for air. I found Alessandro in the kitchen, on the phone, a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked tired, but his eyes softened when he saw me. "I need to go out," I said, the words tumbling out. Not out, but to a market, a real one. I need to see people. I need to feel normal for an hour. Please." He looked like he was going to say no. The hard, protective lines of his face deepened. "Please, Alessandro, I'm going stir-crazy in here. Just for an hour. With your men, I won't run. I promise." He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Leo and Marco will go with you. You do not leave their sight, not for 1 second. Do you understand?" "Yes," I said, a wave of relief washing over me. "Thank you." The market was alive. It was a crisp, fall morning, and the stalls were overflowing with apples and pumpkins, the air smelling of cinnamon and diesel. It was loud. It was real. Leo, a large, kind-eyed man, stayed at my side. Marco, silent and watchful. Walked a few paces behind. Just over here, I said, pointing to a flower stall. I want to, a black van. It came out of nowhere. A side street. It screeched onto the curb, blocking the entire sidewalk. My blood turned to ice. "Liana, run!" Leo yelled. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed me by the arm and shoved me, hard, toward the alley between two buildings. The van's side door slid open. Two men, all in black, masks pulled over their faces, jumped out. Leo drew his gun. "Marco, get her out! Go!" He stepped in front of me, a human shield. I heard a sound, not a gunshot, a thwack, a silenced pistol. Leo grunted, a small, surprised sound. He looked down at his chest. A dark red spot was blooming, spreading. He looked at me, his kind eyes wide with shock. "Run," he whispered. And he fell. I screamed. A hand grabbed me. "Marco." Then he was firing back over my head, pushing me into the alley. "Move! Move to the car!" Shots echoed in the narrow space. I stumbled, my feet slipping. I looked back, just for a second. Leo was on the ground. Still, the men were ignoring him. They were coming for me. Marco shoved me into the back of Alessandro's sedan, which was parked at the end of the alley. He jumped into the driver's seat and threw the car in reverse, tires screaming. The rear windshield exploded. Glass showered over me. I screamed again, curling into a ball on the floor. We sped away, weaving through traffic, the horn blaring. We made it back to the estate. I don't remember the drive. I was in shock. I stumbled out of the car. Leo, his name was Leo, he had been kind, and he was... Alessandro ran out of the house, his face a mask of white-hot terror. "Liana, my God!" He saw my face. He saw the shattered back window. He looked at Marco. "Leo," Marco said, his voice flat, dead. He didn't make it, boss." Alessandro closed his eyes. A single, violent tremor ran through his body. He opened them, the grief, the fear. It was all gone. He was not the boss. He was not the lover. He was an avalanche. He was an inferno. He looked at me, his face grim, his eyes black and bottomless. "Russo has declared war," he said, his voice a low, terrifying calm. "He's tired of hunting. He's coming for you." He took my face in his hands, his grip firm, forcing me to meet his gaze. "It's time to stop hiding. We end this, together." The world narrowed to the sound of my own pulse, a dull, frantic thunder in my ears. The back of the sedan was a cage of shattered glass. I was covered in it, tiny glittering shards woven into my hair, my clothes. Leo was dead. I'd watched him fall. I'd seen the surprise in his kind eyes, the dark stain blooming on his chest. He had died for me. He had died for a woman he'd known for less than a week. Alessandro pulled me from the car, his hands rough, almost violent. He wasn't the man who had held me through the night. He was someone else. He was a general. He was pure, cold, concentrated rage. His face was a white mask of fury. He half dragged, half carried me into the house, into the library, slamming the heavy doors behind us. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his hands checking my arms, my face, his fingers brushing a small cut on my temple. "No," I whispered. My voice was gone. Alessandro, he stepped in front of me. "I know," he said, his voice a low growl. He grabbed a decanter of brandy, the same one from the night we'd come together, and poured a glass. He didn't drink it. He just grabbed a napkin, soaked it, and pressed it hard against the cut on my head. I winced, but the sting was nothing. "It's my fault," I whispered, the words tearing out of my throat. "I had to go out. I killed him." He grabbed my jaw, his grip fierce, forcing my eyes to his. "You did not kill him," he snarled. "Vince Russo killed him, and he will pay for it. He will pay for all of it. For Leo, for Angela, for every second he's had you looking over your shoulder. He let me go and turned, pacing the room like a caged animal. I'll handle this. My way. You will not leave this room. I am ending this. Tonight. His way. The way I'd heard him on the phone. Take him out. Another death. Another body. Another Leo. No? He stopped pacing. He turned to me, his eyes black. What did you say? No, I said, louder. The shock was receding, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes when you've seen the worst and survived. Not your way. I won't. I won't be the reason another person dies. Not like that. He declared war. Liana, he doesn't get a trial. Yes, he does. I said. I walked to his desk. I picked up the locket. The micro drive was still inside. She didn't die for you to get revenge. She died getting this. She died trying to expose him. You want to honor her? You want to end this? We don't murder him in an alley. We burn his entire world to the ground with her evidence. We do it her way. He stared at me, the rage in his eyes warring with something else. Surprise, reluctance. The police, he scoffed. You think I trust the police? Half of them are on his payroll. Then we find the other half. I said, you're Alessandro Varelli. You own this city. You're telling me you don't have one person in federal law enforcement who owes you? One person who's actually clean? His expression shifted. The rage was cooling, replaced by that cold, sharp calculation I knew so well. He was silent for a full minute. There is one, he said, his voice flat. He's not clean because he's a Boy Scout. He's clean because he's ambitious. And he hates Russo's organization. Get dressed. We're going out. We met him at 3 o'clock in the morning, in a sterile, high-rise office 20 floors above the city, far from any federal building. The man's name was Harris. He was young, with tired eyes and a suit that was too cheap for his ambition. He looked at Alessandro with a mixture of fear and distaste. Varelli, Harris said, not offering a hand. This is irregular. Your man on the phone said it was a matter of national security. This had better not be about a zoning permit. It's about Vince Russo, Alessandro said, his voice smooth. Harris laughed, a short, bitter sound. Russo? You brought me here, in the middle of the night, for a mid-tier loan shark? He murdered my wife 5 years ago, Alessandro said. The laughter died in Harris's throat. Alessandro slid the locket across the desk, and this is the proof. For an hour, Harris sat at his computer, the micro drive plugged into a secure reader. We sat in silence. The only sound was the click of the keyboard and the soft hum of the city below. Finally, Harris leaned back, rubbing his eyes. He looked pale. My God, he whispered. This is not just Russo. This is trafficking routes, offshore accounts. It connects to half the city council, 2 judges. He looked at Alessandro. This is old, 6 years old. It's a gold mine. But Russo's lawyers will tear it apart. They'll say it's fabricated, that you fabricated it. So what do we do? I asked, my voice hoarse. Harris looked at me, really seeing me for the first time. We need more. We need something to tie him to this, in the present day. We need him to confess. We need him to talk about the drive, about the murder. So, get an informant, Alessandro said. Wire him. Russo's not an idiot, Harris said, shaking his head. He's paranoid. He's shedding skin after that stun he pulled today. He won't talk to anyone he doesn't know. He's looking for one thing, one person. He looked at me. A cold silence fell over the room. Alessandro stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. Absolutely not. Find another way. There is no other way. Mr. Varelli, Harris said, his voice firming. He was a cop again. He's hunting her. He just proved it. He thinks she has this drive. That's our only leverage. She's the only one who can get close. No, I said, my voice quiet. Alessandro looked at me, a flash of relief in his eyes. No, I repeated, standing up. He's not hunting me. He's trying to buy from me. He thinks I'm a terrified girl, running for her life, who just watched her protection get gunned down. He thinks I'm desperate. He thinks I'm ready to make a deal. And he's right. Liana, don't be a fool. Alessandro snapped. I'm not, I said, turning to him. This is the only way. I've been running from him for 6 years. I'm done running. I'm going to walk right up to him. I'm going to give him what he wants. And you, I said, looking at Harris, are going to be listening to every word. The plan was set. It was terrifyingly simple. We leaked my location, a burner phone, an anonymous tip to one of Russo's known associates. It took less than an hour for the phone to ring. I sat at the kitchen table in the estate, Alessandro on one side, Harris on the other. A tiny, almost invisible wire was taped beneath my collar, the receiver feeding into Harris's laptop. I answered, "Hello?" Well, Vince's voice oozed through the speaker, oily, smug, the voice from my nightmares. Heard you had a bad morning, little girl, tired of running, tired of watching your new friends die. I looked at Alessandro. His face was stone, but his fist was clenched on the table, his knuckles white. I'm done, I whispered. I didn't have to fake the tremor in my voice. I'm tired, you win. I always win, he chuckled. You should have learned that when you were 17. I have what you want, I said, pushing past the wave of nausea. The locket, the one from the hospital, the one the nurse gave me. There was a sharp silence. He was hooked. You take it, I said, the words tumbling out. You take it, and you let me go. You let me disappear. I won't say anything. I just want out. Smart girl, he said. Finally. All right, tomorrow, noon. The Central Fountain at Galleria Park. Come alone. You see a cop, you see anyone who even looks like one of Varelli's goons, and I'm gone. And you're dead. We clear? Clear, I whispered, and hung up. Alessandro closed his eyes. This is a mistake. It's the only move we have, Harris said, already packing his gear. We'll have teams in place. Plain clothes. He won't see us. She'll be safe. She'd better be, Alessandro said, his voice a low, lethal promise. The surveillance van was cramped and smelled of stale coffee and sweat. It was parked 2 blocks from the park, with a clear line of sight. I hate this, Alessandro muttered, his eyes glued to the monitor that showed a grainy, long-distance shot of the fountain. I hate this. She's doing great, Harris said, adjusting his headphones. Wire is hot. She's in position. Just stay calm, Liana. Get him to talk. That's all we need. I watched on the monitor as my Liana, walked into the park. She looked small, fragile. She was wearing a simple gray coat and jeans. She looked like a student. She looked like bait. My chest was so tight I could barely breathe. This was how I'd lost Angela. I had let her walk into a world she didn't understand, and now I was doing it again. I was letting Liana, the woman who had cried in my arms, the woman who had kissed my scars, walk toward the man who had murdered my wife. The guilt was a physical, suffocating weight. We've got him, Harris said. I looked at the monitor. Vince Russo, and he was wearing an expensive overcoat, smiling like he was meeting a friend for lunch. He had 2 men with him, big men who fanned out, their eyes scanning the park. He walked right up to Liana. I could hear his voice in my headphones, tinny and distorted. You look just like your mother, Russo said, always picking the wrong men. Where is it? Here, I heard Liana say, her voice was shaking. Here, just take it and let me go. Please. In a minute, there was a pause. You came alone? You're not as stupid as you look? I told you. I'm done. I'm sure you are. I heard a faint sound of metal. He was opening the locket. We'd put a decoy drive inside. You've been a lot of trouble, you know that? You and the bitch who gave this to you. That's it, Harris whispered, grabbing his radio. That's the connection. All teams, be ready to... But I'm not an idiot. Russo's voice cut through. On the monitor, I saw it. He wasn't letting her go. He grabbed her arm. What? What are you doing? Liana's voice was a gasp of panic. You think I'd do this here? Russo snarled. We're going for a ride. My car. Now. He was dragging her. He was pulling her out of the park. No. Harris was shouting into his radio. He's moving her. He's off script. We lose the wire if he puts her in a car. All teams, move in, move in. I wasn't listening. I was already out of the van. I was sprinting, my heart hammering against my ribs, the cold air burning my lungs. I was not losing her. I was not losing her. Let her go, Russo, I roared. I saw them by the curb. Russo had Liana in a chokehold, his arm around her throat, a gun pressed to her head. His two men were spinning, drawing their own weapons. Russo saw me and his eyes went wide. He didn't just see a threat. He saw me, Alessandro Varelli. And he understood. In that one frozen second, he realized who Angela was. Varelli, he spat, a look of dawning, horrified realization on his face. He started to laugh, a high, panicked sound. The nurse? The one from the hospital? She was your wife? Oh, this is rich. This is... Marco, my man, was faster, and he was part of the FBI's plainclothes team. He fired twice. The two bodyguards went down. It was chaos. People in the park were screaming, running. Russo shoved Liana to the ground. Hard! He raised his gun. He wasn't aiming at me. He wasn't aiming at the approaching sirens. He was aiming at her. He was erasing the witness. There was no time. No time to aim. No time to think. I ran. I threw my body in front of hers, a human shield, tackling her to the pavement just as the gun went off. The sound was deafening, a massive, hollow boom that seemed to explode inside my own chest. It was a strange feeling, not pain, not at first, just impact. A giant fist had punched me, high in the chest, stealing my breath, knocking the world sideways. I was on top of Liana. I could feel her shaking beneath me. Alessandro, she whispered. I tried to answer. I tried to say, I'm fine. But the words wouldn't come. I couldn't breathe. I rolled off her. I heard her scream. It wasn't the scream of a frightened girl. It was a primal, agonizing sound of pure, undiluted loss. It was the sound I had been holding in my own chest for 5 years. No, Gidi. I was on my back, on the cold concrete. The sky was a flat, gray, boring color. Liana was kneeling over me. Her face was frantic. Alessandro, stay with me. Oh God, no. Stay with me. I saw sirens, blue and red lights. Men in FBI vests were swarming, shouting. I saw them tackle Russo, cuffing him, dragging him away. It was over. But all I could see was Liana. Her hands were on my chest. They were trying to stop the wet. There was so much. It was so warm. My shirt, my favorite white shirt, was turning a dark, dark red. Don't you talk! She was sobbing, pressing down, her small hands lost in the blood. Just stay awake. Don't you dare leave me. Do you hear me? Don't you leave me now. I tried to tell her it was okay. I tried to tell her she was safe. But everything was getting very, very quiet. The sirens were fading. Her voice was fading. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was her face, her beautiful, terrified face. The world came back in pieces. First, a sound, a steady, rhythmic beep. Second, a smell, not Jasmine, antiseptic. Third, a feeling, a dull, heavy, throbbing ache that started in my chest and radiated everywhere. I opened my eyes. The light was dim. A private room, not a hospital. A clinic, my clinic. And she was there. Liana? She was asleep in the chair next to my bed. Her head was on her arms, her hair a tangled mess. She was still wearing the same gray coat and jeans. They were stiff and dark with my blood. She hadn't left. I tried to move my hand. The pain was sharp, electric. I grunted. Her head snapped up. Her eyes were wide, red-rimmed, haunted. She looked at me for a second, disbelieving. Alessandro, she whispered. Hey, I rasped. My throat felt like it was full of sand. She let out a sound, half sob, half laugh, and surged forward, her hands hovering over me, afraid to touch. You're awake. Oh my God, the doctor said. They said you were lucky. Liana, what? I said. She started to cry, not the silent, terrified tears I was used to. These were tears of pure, gut-wrenching relief. This is my fault, she whispered, her voice breaking. This is all my fault, Leo. And now you. Shh, I managed slowly to lift my hand, the one without the IV. I fumbled for hers. She grabbed it, clutching my hand in both of hers, pressing it to her cheek. Her tears were hot on my skin. I'm so sorry, she wept. I told you. Don't you dare leave me. I meant it. I was so tired. The pain was pulling me back under. The room was starting to blur. Angela, I murmured. The name just slipped out, a ghost from the anesthetic. I felt her stiffen. I felt her hand start to pull away. No. I tightened my grip. It was weak, but it was enough. I held on. She stopped. I turned my head. My eyes were so heavy, I turned toward her scent. You smell like Jasmine, I whispered, my voice a dry rattle. I felt her tears stop. I took a breath. It hurt, but you're not her. I managed to open my eyes, just a crack. I could see her blurry through my lashes. You're mine. I felt her hand tighten on mine. I felt her other hand come up, her fingers brushing the hair back from my forehead. And then I let the darkness take me again. But this time, I wasn't falling. I was anchored. The clinic was silent, save for the steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. It was, I realized, the first time in 6 years that I had sat in a quiet room without being terrified. I hadn't slept. I hadn't moved from the chair beside his bed in what the nurses told me was almost 2 full days. My gray coat was stiff, stained a dark, rusty brown with Alessandro's blood. I'd refused to change. I'd refused to leave. Leo was dead because of me. Alessandro had taken a bullet meant for me. The guilt was a physical thing, a cold, heavy stone in my stomach. His hand, which I was holding, was pale but warm. The IV tube snaked across his skin. His chest was a landscape of white bandages. The bullet had missed his heart by less than 2 inches. It had shattered 2 ribs and collapsed a lung. The doctors, his doctors, in this private, fortified clinic, had called it a miracle. I called it a debt, one I wasn't sure I could ever repay. I had been staring at his face, at the unnatural stillness of it, when his eyelids fluttered. My breath caught. His eyes, the dark, haunted eyes I knew so well, opened. They were cloudy with pain and drugs. They scanned the room, confused, before landing on me. "Hey," he rasped, his voice a dry crackle. A sound, a strangled sob of pure, undiluted relief, tore out of my throat. You're awake." My hands hovered over him, shaking, afraid to touch anything but his hand. "Liana," he whispered. He saw the state of me, the dried blood on my coat, the terror in my eyes. "This is my fault," I wept, the words I'd been holding back finally spilling out. "This is all my fault, Leo. And now you... I'm so sorry. Alessandro, I'm so sorry." "Shh." He tried to squeeze my hand. It was a weak, faint pressure, but it was there. "Not your fault." He took a pained breath. "Russo, his fault." He closed his eyes again, the effort of speaking too much, but he didn't let go of my hand. He drifted in and out for the next day. I stayed. I read to him from a book of poetry I'd found in the room. I held a cup of water to his lips. I was no longer his asset. I wasn't his lover. I was his anchor. I was the one keeping him tethered to the world. And he was the one who had, in that split second in the park, proven that he was not Vince Russo. Vince would have used me as a shield. Alessandro had become one. On the third day, Agent Harris came to the clinic. He stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands, looking awkward in the face of Alessandro's quiet, menacing power, even when it was diminished. "He's been indicted," Harris said, his voice low. "Vince Russo. The grand jury handed it down an hour ago. We got him. We got him on every count." I looked at Alessandro. His eyes were open, clear for the first time. "It's not just him," Harris continued, a new, nervous energy in his voice. "That micro drive. My God, Mr. Varelli. It was a roadmap. We've arrested 2 city councilmen, a sitting judge, and a dozen members of the police force. Your wife. She built a case that just toppled the entire network. Russo's confession, catching him in the act, it was just the key that unlocked it all." Alessandro just nodded. Once. He looked at me, and his eyes were full of a quiet, profound gratitude that was more intimate than any touch. "She did it." His look said, "We did it." Harris cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. Liana, Russo is talking. He's trying to cut a deal. He's implicating everyone. But the DA wants the case to be airtight. They want your testimony." My stomach dropped. "My testimony?" "Before the grand jury, it's secret, it's safe. But they need to hear it from you, about your past, about him, about why you ran. It's the last piece." I looked at Alessandro. He was watching me, his expression unreadable. He wouldn't make this choice for me. This one was mine. 6 years of running from that story, of burying the girl I had been. And now, they wanted me to dig her up and put her on display. "When?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "Tomorrow," Harris said. The grand jury room was not a courtroom. It was a simple conference room, with a long, polished table and 24 faces. They were just people. Old men, young women, people who looked tired, people who looked bored. And they all looked at me. I sat at the head of the table. A prosecutor, a woman with kind, sharp eyes, sat opposite me. "Miss Liana," she began, "we're just here to hear the truth. Can you please tell us, in your own words, what happened on the night you left your stepfather's home 6 years ago?" This was it. My hands were shaking. I clasped them in my lap. I could feel Alessandro, figuratively, at my back. I could feel Leo. I could feel Angela. I took a deep breath. "I was 17. I began. My voice was a whisper. My stepfather, Vince Russo. I heard him on the phone. He was selling me. I didn't stop. I didn't cry. The shame was there, a cold, familiar stone. But for the first time, it didn't have power over me. I told them everything. I told them about the trafficking. I told them about the fear, the running, the cheap motels. I told them about the ad for Villa Bianca, about the Jasmine perfume, about the note under my door. And then I told them about St. Jude's. She was dying," I said, my voice finally cracking. "Her name was Angela Varelli, and she gave me a locket. She told me to keep it safe, and I did for 6 years. I did." I spoke for 2 hours. When I was done, the room was completely silent. The bored faces were not bored. They were horrified. They were angry. I had done it. I had taken the ugliest, most broken parts of my life and turned them into a weapon for justice. When I walked out of that room, I felt light. The gray, heavy cloak of victimhood I had worn for 6 years had finally been lifted. Agent Harris was waiting for me in the hallway. "You were incredible, Liana," he said, his voice full of a new, deep respect. "You just buried him. He's never getting out. The trafficking, the murder of a federal witness, which, by the way, Angela Varelli became the second she started gathering that data. He's done." He walked with me toward the elevators, which brings me to my next point. The U.S. Marshals are ready. We can have you in witness protection by the end of the day. A new name, a new city, a new life. Everything you've been running toward. No one. Not Russo's people. Not anyone will ever find you. He was offering me the dream, the escape, a clean slate, everything I had ever wanted. I stopped. I looked at him. I thought about it. A small town somewhere, a quiet job, a life without looking over my shoulder, a life without Alessandro, a life where I would always be hiding, even if I was safe. I turned and looked down the hall. At the end, by the security checkpoint, a black sedan was waiting. Marco was standing by the door, his face as impassive as ever. He wasn't there to guard me. He was there to collect me, to take me home. "Thank you, Agent," I said, turning back to Harris. I held out my hand. "For everything, but I'm tired of running." He looked confused, but a new life. "I don't want a new life," I said, and the words felt truer than anything I had ever spoken. "I want my life, the one I've earned." I shook his hand. I walked away from him, away from the offer of safety, away from the ghost of the girl who had been running. I walked toward Alessandro's car. I got in, and Marco drove me home. Alessandro was sitting in the library when I returned. He was out of the clinic, against doctor's orders. He was still pale, and his arm was in a sling to protect his chest, but he was dressed. He stood when I walked in. He didn't ask how it went. He didn't ask what I said. He just looked at me. "Harris called me. He told me what he offered you." "I know," I said, "and he told me what you said." I stood in front of him. "I'm not leaving, Alessandro, unless you want me to." He reached out with his good hand, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw. "Leave?" he whispered, his voice rough. "Liana, I've spent the last 5 years in a tomb. You are the only thing that's real. Leaving is not an option for either of us." The weeks that followed were a strange, quiet blur. Alessandro healed. His body knitted itself back together, leaving a long, angry red scar on his chest that I knew would fade to white. I healed, too. My nightmares of Vince slowly began to fade, replaced by nothing, just quiet, uninterrupted sleep, safe in Alessandro's arms. But the house was changing. He was in the library constantly, not pacing, but on the phone, and the conversations were different. "Sell the shipping containers, all of them. Liquidate the assets in the Caymans. I don't care about the loss. I want the books clean. As of today, Varelli Imports is 100% legitimate." He was dismantling his father's empire. He was getting out. I found him one afternoon, staring out the window, a look of deep, frustrated concentration on his face. "It's a headache," he said, sensing me behind him. "Going clean. My father. He would have called me a fool." "Why are you doing it?" I asked, wrapping my arms around his waist from behind, resting my cheek against his strong back. He put his good hand over mine. "Because I can't ask you to build a life with me in a world that looks anything like the one you ran from." He paused. "And because of her, Angela, she hated this part of it. She was always trying to build something clean. I'm finishing the job." He turned in my arms, his eyes soft. "I'm starting a new foundation, a real one, funded by, let's call them former assets of the Varelli family." "Like the hospital wing?" "No," he said. "This one is different. It's for women, runaways, victims of trafficking, a place for them to go, a safe house, with legal services, counseling, a place to start over, the kind of place you should have had." My heart swelled. "Alessandro, that's incredible." "It needs a director," he said, his gaze intent. "It needs someone to run it, someone who understands, someone who can see the girl who walks in the door and know exactly what she needs, someone they can trust." You want me to..." "I want you to save them, Liana," he said, his voice thick, "like you saved me." Tears streamed down my face. He wasn't just offering me a future. He was taking my broken, ugly past and turning it into a purpose. He was telling me that my scars were not a weakness, they were my strength. A few months later, spring had arrived. The city was thawing. Alessandro's scar had faded, and he no longer wore the sling. He was whole. He found me one evening, reading in the library. The foundation was in its early stages. I was buried in legal briefs and staffing charts. "Come with me," he said, taking the book from my hands. "There's something I want you to see." He led me from the library, past the kitchen to a small, unassuming staircase I had never noticed. It led up and up until we reached a heavy wooden door. He opened it. I stepped out onto the roof of the estate. It was a garden, a hidden, secret world, enclosed in glass walls to protect it from the wind, and it was filled, wall to wall, with jasmine. The scent was overwhelming, but it wasn't the heavy, oily perfume from my grandmother's jar. This was green. It was alive. It was sweet and clean and real. This was hers, I whispered. "Yes," Alessandro said. He was standing by the low wall, looking out at the city lights twinkling below. This was her sanctuary. After she died, I locked the door. I couldn't breathe up here. The smell, it was grief. It was every promise I'd broken. Every night I'd come home too late. It was failure. He was silent for a long moment, just breathing in the scented air. He turned to me, his eyes clearer than I had ever seen them. The ghosts were gone. "This was once grief," he said, his voice rough. He took my hand, lacing his fingers with mine. "Now, it's hope." He pulled me closer, his other hand coming up to cup my face. "You did this. Liana, you didn't just clear her name. You gave this back to me. You gave her back to me, not as a ghost, but as a memory, a good one." "Alessandro," I whispered, my heart so full I thought it might burst. What happens to us now, with everything done?" "Done?" He smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "It's just beginning." He looked around the garden, at the life blooming all around us. What happens now is whatever we want. We live, we build this foundation, we heal. We have a normal life, whatever that is. Marriage, a family, if you want it. He looked terrified, suddenly more scared than he'd been facing Russo's gun. "I want all of it, Liana. I want 100 years of boring and quiet and normal. With you." I started to cry, again. But these were not the tears of a victim. They were not tears of guilt. They were tears of release. "Hey," he said, his smile fading, his thumb brushing away a tear. What did I say?" "Nothing," I whispered, laughing through the tears. It's just, for my entire life, Alessandro, from the time I was a little girl. I never thought I was good. I never thought I was worth loving." His expression broke. He pulled me to him, his arms crushing me, his face buried in my hair. "You were always worth loving, Liana," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion that matched my own. "You were always worth it. I was the one who had to become worthy of you." We didn't set a date. We didn't need to. We were already married, in the ways that mattered. That night, after a long, quiet dinner, we were in the kitchen, the one that had once been so intimidating, with its steel appliances and army of staff. Now, it was just our kitchen. I was at the sink, washing a plate. The house was silent. The guards who had once patrolled the halls were gone. We didn't need them anymore. I felt him come up behind me. He didn't speak. His arms just wrapped around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. I leaned back against his chest, closing my eyes. He started to hum, a low, soft, old Italian tune I didn't recognize. "Dance with me," he murmured against my ear. I laughed. Here in the kitchen, there's no music. We don't need music. He turned me around, took the dish towel from my hand and tossed it on the counter. He pulled me into the center of the vast, tiled floor. My feet were bare, so were his. He took my hand, placed his other on the small of my back, and we began to move, just swaying, a slow, shuffling dance to the sound of his quiet humming and the distant rush of the ocean. I rested my head against his chest. I could hear his heartbeat, strong, steady, safe. I was not a ghost. I was not a prisoner. I was not a victim. I was home. He leaned down, his lips brushing my hair, and he breathed me in. She didn't wear the perfume anymore, but somehow, he still smelled it, every time he held her. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey with Liana and Alessandro. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from. And don't forget to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for more. I would love to read your thoughts on their story, so please share them in English.